You know, I was looking at the stack of research on this whole narrative turn thing today, and it made me realize I've been looking at museums and, honestly, just my own house completely wrong.
Oh, how so?
Well, we have this tendency to think of history as this very subtle, dusty thing. You know, you dig up a pot, you put a label on it, and boom, that's history.
The object in the glass case.
Exactly. But looking at the materials for today, specifically about this shift in curatorial practice, that view just feels incredibly naive now. We aren't just looking at static objects anymore, we're looking at witnesses.
It is a fundamental shift in how we understand material culture. I mean, for a long, long time, the object was just a data point. Right. It was a what? What is it? A bowl. When was it made? 200 BC. But the narrative turn that scholars like Dr. Katie Hannigan are pushing for, it completely flips that on its head.
Okay.
It stops asking what. It starts asking who. Who held this? Who broke it? Who mended it? The object, it becomes a character in a drama that, in many ways, is still unfolding.
Okay, that sounds great on a dust jacket, but let's unpack this a little. When you say drama, are we just projecting stories onto these things, or are the stories actually there? Because hidden narrative sounds a bit like we're just making up fiction to make old rocks interesting.
That is a fair skepticism. It's a really good question. But it's not about invention, it's about extraction. Think of it like a crime scene. The evidence doesn't speak in words, but it retains the imprint of events. Let's take the African net sponge, which was a key example in the reading.
Oh, right, the sponge.
Yeah. If you look at it through a purely functionalist lens, you know, the old way of doing history, it's a mesh tool for exfoliation.
A scrubber.
A scrubber. You catalog it, hygiene implement, nylon or natural fiber. End of file.
Right, I mean, I have one in my shower right now.
Exactly. But if you apply this narrative lens, you start looking at the social context. In many African and diasporic cultures, that sponge isn't just about getting clean. It's a repository of memory. The sources highlight how the preparation of the sponge, the passing of the technique from a parent to a child, it represents a rite of passage. It's a moment of intimacy and family bonding that happens in a very private space.
So the sponge itself becomes a vehicle for what? Cultural resilience.
Precisely. It's a humble object, sure. It's not a gold crown. Of course not. But it carries the weight of a civilization's daily life. It tells a story of survival, of maintaining identity through these small domestic rituals, even when the outside world, maybe a world of colonization or displacement, is trying to erase that identity.
The sponge survives.
The narrative is woven right into the mesh.
Okay, I can buy that for a cultural artifact where we have, oral histories to back it up. But what about the stuff where the people are long dead and they didn't leave a diary? The research mentioned some pretty intense methodology to get these objects to talk. It felt less like history and more like CSI.
It is absolutely forensic. History, as reclamation as they call it, requires digging into data that was never meant to be historical record. You have historians now scouring ship manifests, financial ledgers.
And even social gossip columns from the 19th century. I saw that.
Yes, gossip columns.
Wait, gossip columns? You're telling me historians are using the Victorian equivalent of TMZ to verify provenance? That seems, unreliable.
It sounds counterintuitive, I know, but think about it. Official records, wills, deeds, they're curated. They're often legal fictions designed to present a certain image.
Okay.
But a gossip column, that's where you find out who was actually wearing the brooch at the gala in 1890. It tells you the social context. Was it a scandal? Was it a power move? It connects the cold object to a hot, living moment. And then you layer on the hard science.
This was the part that really surprised me, the use of ultraviolet and infrared light. I mean, I know art restorers use that to check for damage, but how does it help with the narrative?
Well, it reveals the decisions that were erased. UV light, because of its shorter wavelength, excites the electrons in organic materials. It can reveal surface alterations that the naked eye just misses, like a repair made 50 years ago that was painted over.
Okay, so you see the cracks in the story.
But infrared is the real time machine. It penetrates the pigment layers. It allows us to see the underdrawing.
The sketch before the painting.
Right, and often the underdrawing is different from the final painting. You might see that a king was originally painted holding a sword, but in the final version, he's holding a scroll. That change is a narrative. Why does the artist change it? Was it political pressure? Did the king want to look more peaceful, more learned? You are literally seeing the hidden message, the original intent, that was covered up by centuries of paint.
It's like X-raying the psychology of the past. Wow. That's actually a perfect segue for our mission today. We are going to take this detective mindset and apply it across a pretty wild timeline. We're starting in the Byzantine Empire, dealing with some very high-stakes politics involving dead bodies. Relics. Then we're moving to art that changes how we see God. And this is the part I'm really curious to bridge. We're going to end up looking at 1950s gas stations.
The building fossils.
Right. It feels like a massive jump from relics to roadside diners, but the argument here is that the human behavior underlying them is, identical.
It is. Whether it's a sacred bone or a crumbling Texaco, these objects are containers for human belief. They hold the secrets of what we valued and how we try to control our world.
All right, let's fire up the time machine. We are going back to the Byzantine Empire, 5th century. We need to talk about relics. Now, growing up, I always thought of relics as these purely spiritual things. You go to a cathedral, there's a bone in a glass box, you pray, you leave.
A very common understanding.
But the reading suggests that for the Byzantine elite, these were closer to political weapons.
Weapons is a strong word, but it's an appropriate one. In the Byzantine world, and the medieval West for that matter, relics were the ultimate source of legitimacy.
I questioned this when I read it. The text actually called them nuclear weapons of politics. That feels like hyperbole. You're telling me a shin bone had the geopolitical weight of a warhead. How does that actually work on the ground?
Think about it in terms of deterrent and consolidation of power. If you control the physical remains of a saint, someone who is undeniably a friend of God, you control the access point to the divine. In a society where religion and politics are not separate, that is absolute power. If I have the saint, God is on my side. If you oppose me, you are opposing the saint. It's a way to unperson your political enemies without lifting a sword. And Empress Pulcheria was the grandmaster of this game.
So let's paint the picture of Pulcheria. She's the sister of Emperor Theodosius II. She's taken a vow of virginity. She's deeply religious, but she's in a tight spot.
A very, very tight spot. For years, she was the power behind the throne. She essentially raised her brother. But then Theodosius marries Eudocia. And Eudocia is smart, she's beautiful, she's a poet, and she starts pushing Pulcheria out of the inner circle. Eudocia gets the title of Augusta. Pulcheria is being sidelined.
The classic in-law conflict, but with an entire empire at stake.
And it gets worse. This isn't just a domestic squabble, it's a theological crisis. This is the era of the Nestorian controversy. Now, to oversimplify a very complex theological war, Nestorius, the Archbishop of Constantinople, was arguing that Mary should not be called Theotokos.
Which means Mother of God.
Correct. He wanted to call her Christotokos, Mother of Christ, implying she only gave birth to the human side of Jesus, not the divine.
Which sounds like semantics to us today, but back then, people were rioting in the streets over this.
Exactly. And Pulcheria was a die-hard supporter of the Theotokos title. Her whole identity as a virgin empress was tied to the Virgin Mary. If Mary gets demoted, Pulcheria gets demoted. And the Nestorian circle was attacking her personally. They were questioning her authority as a woman to even speak on theology.
So she needs a win. Badly. She needs a sign from God that she's right and they're wrong.
And lo and behold, she finds one. Or, more accurately, she orchestrates the discovery of one. Between 434 and 446, Pulcheria is centrally involved in the discovery of the relics of the 40 martyrs of Sebaste.
The timing is incredibly convenient.
It is suspicious, isn't it? But look at the narrative she constructs. Eudocia, her rival, had recently scored a major win by bringing relics of Saint Stephen to Constantinople from Jerusalem. That aligned Eudocia with the holy geography of the Holy Land.
So Eudocia has the Jerusalem connection.
She does. Pulcheria needed to counter that. By finding the 40 martyrs right there in the capital and claiming that the martyrs revealed themselves to her in a dream, she was reclaiming the narrative.
She's basically saying, I don't need to go to Jerusalem. The saints are talking to me right here.
Precisely. And she builds the Church of St. Lawrence to house them. She even transfers St. Stephen's relics there too, effectively co-opting Eudocia's win. She was signaling that she was the legitimate heir of the Theodosian dynasty, and that the Chalcedonians, her theological faction, controlled the power of the saints. It crushed the Monophysite and Nestorian descent because, well, how do you argue with a miracle?
It's brilliant. She weaponized archaeology to win a PR war. But this idea of owning the narrative through relics, it doesn't just stop in the 5th century. The outline jumps us forward to Venice, specifically post 1204.
Yes, Venice. Venice is the great warehouse of stolen narrative. After the Fourth Crusade sacked Constantinople, which we will touch on later, Venice just flooded with looted Byzantine relics, and the city-state had to figure out how to integrate all this stolen power into its own identity.
And there's the story of the rivalry of relics involving the True Cross. This felt like a straight-up marketing competition between two fraternities.
It was. You have these Skol Grandi, these large charitable confraternities. They were sort of like social clubs, but with very heavy religious duties. In 1369, a man named Philippe de Mézières gifts a relic of the True Cross to the Confraternity of San Giovanni Evangelista.
And this is supposed to be the wood from the actual crucifixion.
That was the claim. And for San Giovanni, this was a jackpot. Miracles started happening immediately, healing the sick, calming storms. The relic performed, which validated the confraternity's status in Venice. They became the place to be, the place with the real power.
But then comes the competition.
A century later, 1472, Cardinal Bessarion. He's a fascinating figure, a Greek scholar who converted to Catholicism, a kind of bridge between East and West. He gifts another True Cross relic to a rival confraternity, the Santa Maria dei Battuti della Carità.
So it's my cross is better than your cross.
Essentially. And San Giovanni Evangelista did not take this lying down. They commissioned a massive cycle of paintings by Gentile Bellini and others to document the miracles of their cross. They created a visual dossier of proof.
A portfolio of miracles.
Exactly. The narrative wasn't just, we have the relic. It was, our relic works better, and here are the pictures to prove it. It was a rhetoric of display, a fight for donors and prestige in the very competitive Venetian social hierarchy.
It really emphasizes that the object itself, the little splinter of wood, is almost meaningless without the packaging. The story is what makes the object powerful.
And the material packaging matters too. This brings us to what the research calls the hierarchy of materials. We tend to overlook this. We see a gold box and we just think rich. But the specific choices, silk, ivory, enamel, that's a language.
I was really struck by the example of the portable altar of Countess Gertrude. This is from, around 1045. It's a gold box covered in gems. But the source focuses on what's inside, specifically the silk.
Yes. Inside this incredibly ornate, beautiful box is a relic of St. Germanus, a bone. But the bone is wrapped in silk. Now to us, silk is just a nice fabric. In 11th century Germany, silk was alien technology. It came from the distant East, from Byzantium or the Islamic world. It was light, shimmering, and incredibly strong.
So using silk wasn't just about, cushioning the bone.
No, it's a theological statement. By wrapping the bone in silk, they were creating a barrier between the sacred matter and the profane world. It signified that the object inside was too precious for common air. The silk acts as a liminal veil. It just screams mystery.
It's the difference between handing someone a diamond ring in a Ziploc bag versus a velvet box. The velvet tells you how to feel about the ring.
That's a perfect analogy. And the more layers you add, gold, enamel, silk, the more you amplify the nuclear power of the relic at the core.
We've been talking about the high-end stuff, emperors, cardinals, countesses, but the deep dive promise is to look at how this affects regular people. The section on magic in the social sphere was wild. We have these Byzantine amuletic armbands.
This is where we see the hidden narrative of the everyday woman. These bands come from Syria and Palestine, around the 6th or 7th century. They're made of silver or bronze, nothing too fancy.
And the imagery is eclectic.
That's a polite way to put it. You have standard gospel scenes, the Annunciation, the Nativity, but right next to them you have the Holy Rider, a saint spearing a demon, and the Chnubis.
The Chnubis.
Which is a magical lion-headed serpent motif with roots in Gnosticism and even Egyptian magic.
Wait, so they're mixing Christianity with straight-up sorcery. Wasn't that heresy?
It was definitely on the fringe, but the function drove the form. These were used specifically to protect women from uterine disorders, issues with pregnancy, menstruation, childbirth. It was kind of sympathetic magic. They were throwing everything they had at the problem. Jesus, the saints, and the magic serpent.
It sounds desperate, but you made a point in the notes that wearing this wasn't just about health, it was a social signal.
Right. Think about the anxiety of that era. Disease was rampant, but so was religious suspicion. By wearing an armband with gospel scenes visibly on your body, you are broadcasting your identity. You're saying, I am a pious Christian.
Even if you've got a magic snake on the back.
Especially if you have the magic snake. The Christian imagery acts as a shield, not just against demons, but against your neighbors. It protects you from social suspicion. It says, I'm not a witch. Look at my Annunciation scene. It's a survival strategy worn right on the sleeve.
That concept of the object becoming the protection, it leads us to the weirdest thing in the whole stack. The icon made of relics. I need you to explain this slowly because my brain rejected it the first time I read it.
It is a mind-bending concept. Usually an icon is a painting of a saint. It's a representation.
A picture.
A picture.
Yeah.
But there was a tradition, particularly in Byzantium, where they would take a relic, a piece of bone or dust from a saint's tomb, grind it up, and mix it into the wax or the resin used to create the image.
So the paint itself is made of the dead person.
Yes. The material substance of the saint is physically embedded in the image of the saint.
That just collapses the whole idea of a picture. It's not a picture anymore. It's a clone, a golem. What is that?
It's a real presence. The line between the signifier, the picture, and the signified the saint is completely erased. When you pray to that icon, you aren't sending a message to heaven. You are speaking to the saint who is physically in the room with you. It's a profound theological statement about matter. It says that holiness isn't just an abstract idea. It can reside in the molecules of dust and wax.
That is heavy. And it shows how visual art was used to grapple with these massive theological problems. Which brings us to the time machine section. We're leaving Byzantium for a moment and going to India. The Amravati Stupa.
Ah, yes, this is one of my favorite examples of a narrative flip. It's a double-sided limestone relief.
And the source says one side is from around 50 BC and the other is from 250 AD.
Right. And those 300 years cover one of the biggest revolutions in religious history, the shift from aniconic to iconic Buddhism.
We need to define aniconic, because I think I just glossed over it initially. Why didn't they show the Buddha? Was it, forbidden?
It wasn't necessarily a ban in the way we think of it, like in some forms of Islam. It was a philosophical stance. The Buddha had achieved nirvana. He had extinguished the self, escaped the cycle of rebirth. So the early thinkers asked, how can you draw someone who no longer exists in a form we can understand?
Oh, I see.
To draw him as a human would be to drag him back into the world of suffering he just escaped.
So it was out of respect for his enlightenment.
Exactly. So on side A, the 50 BC side, you see an empty throne. You see footprints. You see the Bodhi tree. The worshippers are there, and they're bowing to a void. The center of the image is an absence.
And then 300 years later, they flip the stone over. What happens on side B?
Side B, from 250 AD, depicts the Buddha in full human form. He is standing there, teaching, interacting. The theology had shifted. The emphasis moved towards the Buddha as a compassionate teacher who is accessible to devotees. The iconic phase begins.
But why reuse the stone? I mean, India has plenty of rocks. Was this just being cheap?
I really doubt it was about budget constraints. This was a major site. Reusing the stone was almost certainly a deliberate narrative choice. By carving the new human Buddha on the back of the old aniconic stone, they were maintaining a physical link to the ancestors. They were saying, our new truth is built on the foundation of the old truth.
It's continuity.
It's continuity. The stone itself becomes a document of that evolution.
That idea of the eternal present, where the past and present kind of merge, that actually loops us right back to Byzantium. We have to talk about San Vitale and Ravenna. I've seen pictures, and it looks like a kaleidoscope of mosaics, just overwhelming. Yeah. But Andrew Graepler's analysis argues we're looking at it wrong if we just stand there and gawk.
Right. We tend to treat churches like art galleries. We walk around, we look up, and we say, oh, that's pretty. But Graepler argues for a functionalist reading. These mosaics were designed to interact with the movement of the liturgy.
Meaning the service itself activates the art.
Yes. So imagine you are a congregant in the 6th century. You enter the nave. As the service progresses, you move toward the altar for the Eucharist. As you physically move forward, your sight lines change. The apocalyptic scenes in the vault and the images of Christ in the heavenly court suddenly come into full view.
So as you approach the communion, the body of God, you see the image of God.
Precisely. You aren't just standing in a church in Italy. The architecture and the art conspire to transport you. You are entering the eternal present. You are standing before the throne of God, just as the saints in the mosaics are. The art isn't decoration, it's a virtual reality interface for the soul.
A virtual reality interface for the soul. That is a beautiful way to put it. But narratives aren't always about preservation and awe. Sometimes they're about destruction. We have to talk about the Bronze Horsemen of Constantinople. This story, I have to admit, it broke my heart a little.
It is tragedy of conflicting values. This is a monumental bronze statue in the Hippodrome, likely of Justinian I. For centuries, it was the mascot of the city, a symbol of its power and endurance.
And we have a description from Nicetas Choniates, a historian who watched the city fall. He describes the statue with this incredible detail, specifically the cloak of lion skin on the horseman.
Chonius was obsessed with that lion skin. He describes the texture, the flow of the metal. He says it was so realistic it actually frightened onlookers. It looked like it was about to roar. To Chonius, that statue represented technique, the height of civilization, art, and skill.
And then the Fourth Crusade happens in 1204. The Crusaders, the Latins, they sack the city.
And this is where the narrative crashes. The Crusaders look at this masterpiece, this lion skin that took years and immense skill to craft, and they don't see art. They see cash, they see metal.
They melted it down for coins.
They melted it down to mint coins to pay the troops. Chonius writes about this with such bitterness. He uses the destruction of the statue to define the barbarian. To him, a barbarian is someone who sees an object and only sees its material value, not its narrative value. The Byzantines saw a story, the Crusaders saw liquidity.
It's such a stark reminder that heritage is fragile. One culture's sacred history is another culture's scrap metal. And that tension between trash and treasure, between the sacred and the functional, that actually brings us to the modern era.
The building fossils.
This is the transition I struggled with at first, I'll be honest. We're going from Justinian's bronze horse to a 1950s gas station. But the logic, well, it holds up. We're talking about monuments.
Exactly. The source material uses the term building fossil to describe a big stop, an abandoned travel center or gas station.
I love the term building fossil, but let's be real for a second. A rusty gas pump isn't exactly the Amravati Stupa. Why does it deserve the deep dive treatment?
Because it implies extinction. A fossil is evidence of a life form that no longer fits the environment. These 1950s gas stations, with their neon, their massive overhangs, their service with a smile layout, are remnants of a specific socioeconomic era that is dying or dead. They tell us about the theology of the automobile age.
The theology of the car. I like that.
Think about it. The gas station was the temple of the mid-20th century. It was where you fueled the ultimate expression of American freedom. The architecture reflects that optimism. Finding one of these abandoned big stops is like finding a dinosaur bone. It helps you reconstruct a lost world of family road trips, cheap fuel, and a very specific type of consumer confidence.
The source made a comparison here that I thought was a reach, but I want you to defend it. It compared these modern utility structures to public clocks in Constantinople.
It's not a reach at all. It's about the control of public behavior. In Constantinople, public clock sundials, water clocks, were monuments. They were placed in the Basilica or the Hagia Sophia. Installing a clock was a monumental act by an emperor.
Because it's standardized time.
Yes, it said, I, the emperor, control the rhythm of this city. It was a tool of administrative regulation. Now look at the gas station. It regulates movement. It dictates where you stop, where you go. It's a different voice saying, I, the oil company, control the flow of the traveler. Architecture frames our behavior. The gas station is just a less pretty version of the imperial clock.
So when we drive past that crumbling diner, we shouldn't just see blight, we should see the ruins of an empire.
An empire of oil and chrome, yes.
Speaking of things we overlook on the street, let's talk about secular shrines. This comes from Andrew Cornell Robinson's project, Wishful Thinking. He looks at those temporary memorials, the flowers, the teddy bears, the candles that pop up where someone has died tragically.
We've all seen them. They are so heartbreaking. But Robinson noticed a very specific interaction. These memorials are usually on the sidewalk, public property. Technically, legally, they are trash. They are debris.
But the sanitation workers don't just throw them away.
No. Robinson observed that sanitation workers, who are paid to clear debris, would often carefully cover these memorials in plastic sheeting to protect them from the rain.
That's incredibly touching.
It is, and it's narrative creation in real time. The community, including the city workers, is transforming trash into a sacred trust. They are sacralizing public space. And by wrapping those flowers in plastic, they're doing exactly what Countess Gertrude did when she wrapped that bone in silk.
Wow, that brings it completely full circle. The materials change silk versus a plastic drop cloth, but the human instinct is identical. We wrap the things we value to separate them from the profane, everyday world.
Exactly. We are trying to arrest the decay of memory. We are saying, this matters. This person was here.
And this brings us to the final repository of these stories, the museum. But the museum itself seems to be having an identity crisis. It's not just a warehouse for old stuff anymore.
It can't be. The narrative turn demands more. Look at the U.S. Veterans Memorial Museum. The source discusses the shift from displaying dusty rifles to vessels of stories.
This resonated with me. A rifle is just a machine, a mass-produced object. How do you make it speak?
Provenance research. You connect the object to a person. If I show you a pair of combat boots, it's just leather. But if I tell you, these boots were worn by Private Miller during the Battle of the Bulge, and this scuff mark here happened when he dove for cover, suddenly the object vibrates.
It becomes a bridge to empathy.
It fosters a connection to the lived experience, the grit, the fear, the camaraderie. It stops being about war with a capital W and becomes about a human being, a person.
But history isn't just about empathy, it's about politics. We saw that with Pulcheria. And there's a project mentioned called the Nexus of Decision that seems to be addressing this head-on.
This is a fascinating residency program for intellectuals from Ukraine, Poland, and Germany. They were examining cultural blind spots.
Which is a polite way of saying the lies we tell ourselves about our history.
Correct. They view history not as a list of inevitable dates, but as a series of decisions. A treaty signed in 1920 wasn't destiny. It was a choice made by flawed people in a room. And those choices created narratives, myths that fuel conflicts today. By unpacking those narratives, they are trying to diffuse the hidden bombs of history.
It's active history. It's history as conflict resolution. And looking to the future, the very architecture of museums is starting to reflect these different approaches. We have the Grand Egyptian Museum, the GM, opening in Giza.
The GM is the old school maximized. It is the largest archaeological museum for a single civilization. For the first time, all of Tutankhamun's treasures, thousands and thousands of objects, will be displayed together.
And the building itself is designed to lock that narrative in place, right?
Yes, it has these massive panoramic windows that align the artifacts visually with the pyramids outside. It's forcing the context. It's saying, this belongs here. This is the root of civilization. End of story.
You contrast that with the Museum of the Future in Dubai.
Which is the polar opposite. A tortoise-shaped building covered in Arabic calligraphy with voids in the middle and inside. It's not about the past. It's about speculative technologies. It challenges the very definition of a museum. Is a museum a place for dead things, or is it a laboratory for what comes next?
And finally, there's the museum that has no walls at all, the Digital Frontier.
The Beyond 5000 project and other digital initiatives. This is democratization on a massive scale. You can now get 1 to 12 scale replicas of artifacts for your home study. But the real game changer is preservation. We talked about the Bronze Horseman being melted down. If we had a detailed digital scan of that, the narrative wouldn't be lost.
Like with the Codex Sinaiticus.
Exactly. Digital copies of the Codex or virtual tours of St. Catherine's Monastery ensure that even if the physical object is destroyed by war or climate change, the narrative survives. It opens the hidden narrative to anyone with an internet connection, breaking the gatekeeping of the elite institutions.
So we've been on quite a journey. We've seen Empress Pulcheria use dead bodies to secure her throne. We've seen a stone in India flip the script on how to visualize the divine. We've seen that a 1950s gas station is basically a dinosaur bone, and that wrapping flowers in plastic is a sacred act.
It's a lot to take in. But the synthesis is simple. The object is merely the starting point. As one of our sources noted, the object is merely the starting point for a much larger story.
We have to stop being passive observers. We have to be detectives.
We have to look past the form, the color, and the texture to find the human resilience, the belief, the fear, the hope that's embedded within.
So here is the final provocation for you listening. Next time you are cleaning your house, or you pick up a humble object, maybe it's your grandmother's old mixing bowl, or even just the smartphone you're holding in your hand right now, ask yourself, what hidden narrative is this creating?
What building fossils are we creating right now? If a historian finds your coffee mug in 500 years, what story will it tell about who you were, what you valued, and the economy you lived in?
Don't just live with your stuff. Interrogate it. Be a narrative detective in your own life. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It's been a pleasure.